Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today for this our first session of our second seminar. I'm Marvi Mazhar. I'm an architect and a practitioner based out of Karachi, Pakistan. And working in the city means a lot of conversations and dialogues and discourses that needs to take place on everyday basis. And the kind of work one practices and believes also has to face a lot of rupturedness and a lot of displacement. And the idea to talk about heritage in this mainstream conversation is to understand from others in alliance and to learn from each other. There is three types of clusters that we work through. One is, of course, the government body. Then the middle is the practitioner professionals. And the third cluster is civil society, who's doing some incredible work in the norms of like how we look at and have a relationship with the city. So today's panel is a conversation around leading up towards how this community-led revitalization takes place. I'm going to a little bit talk about Pakistan Chowk Community Center, and then I'll let my colleagues to talk more about the subject and the theme. Pakistan Chowk Community Center came as an output of my own relationship to the city and also learning from others. So we thought that Pakistan Chowk Community Center in Old Town will be an embodiment of looking at different lenses of how heritage is perceived in today's time. So we do not think that romanticism and nostalgia is a way forward, and freezing the moment by doing rehabilitation and preservation from the standard point of view, how everyone else dwells of Old Town, but making it a living, livable space which is activated and moves on forward with various notions. So there could be a commercialization, there could be residential, there could be living together in different forms and attitudes. In between those spaces, there are these public spaces, which are like open-ended spaces, which can be rehabilitated not through just the lens of beautification, but active spaces. They can have a moment. They can be there for 24 hours, or they can go on for as a sustainable module. Now, this kind of understanding needs to be delivered to the governance and policymakers as well, because clearly there is an archaic way or like a very inherited way of thinking, which is coming, of course, through our colonial legislations, which is coming through the bylaws, which have been top down, rather than grassroots level thinking. So Pakistan Chowk Community Center was that space in between. We have never really understood if we are really a center. We are still in the notion of understanding that. After COVID, we became a digital space, and we have our research projects going on. Most of our work is uploaded on our website. You can have a look more in detail. The only active project at the moment, which is on weekly basis, is Heritage Walk Karachi, which is the sustainable methodology of like, for example, today's this conference, this seminar is all self-funded. We do not have any, and this is the first time that we haven't taken any international grant to develop this kind of module. And we're of course very lucky that everyone accepted it on the basis of being and believing in part of this conversation. So thank you so much for being part of this dialogue. So Pakistan Chowk Community Center has a few clusters, which is about activating the public arena spaces, thinking about it with different stakeholders and agencies. And then we have our research, summer and internship programs, which leads up to this kind of seminar, which is again a student-led. I have been the background person, and this is all thanks to my entire colleagues, my system, where whoever has done this have done the magic. So again, I would really like to bring in limelight that the artwork, the posters, the social media methodology, everything is done by these incredible students who have made this happen. And also to look for new voices, to look of young voices, mid-age practitioners was our goal. So we are also drifting away from established methodologies. We want to think about out and deconstruct the idea of what are the new voices. So here on this note, I'm going to let my colleague proceed, and then looking forward to hearing from each one of you. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to have you all over here. My name is Zaina Bahasaik. I'm currently a student at LUMS, and I, alongside my colleagues, have been working on this series. Um, First, I'm going to give just a little bit of kind of like continue on from what Marvi just said, and then I'm going to give a little bit of background onto what the specific session is going to be about. So, as mentioned before, the listing of heritage sites in Pakistan specifically, though we have people and though we have panelists here who are not from Pakistan and who are from South Asia in general, the listing of heritage sites in Pakistan, both rural and urban, in 1994 has restricted us to a given idea of what heritage means. And this gap from 1994 to right now, which is 2024, that's 30 years. It hasn't been reconciled with, it hasn't been grappled with enough. So we haven't progressed from this retrospective mindset enough to be able to change our methodologies to understand to understand a new idea of heritage, to include what culture looks like today, to see how do we collect new archives, how do we understand this, and how do we include modernity into our understanding of heritage. Today, the topic of our discussion today is community-led revitalization, a sustainable approach to heritage preservation in South Asia. What we are going to be talking about is, first of all, heritage preservation is a crucial aspect of maintaining the cultural and historical character of urban environments. And community-led revitalization is really vital to sustainable heritage preservation. As it ensures active socio-political engagement and self-advocacy from local communities, members of which we've called here today as our panelists. In this South Asian context, where historic cities face threats from colonial legacies, centralized planning, limited resource capacity, and lack of government, I would like to introduce to you Aishwarya Tipnis, who is a distinguished architect and heritage conservationist from New Delhi. She received the UNESCO Award for Heritage Conservation in 2016 and the Chevalier de Lettres from France in 2018. She co-founded Jugardopolis to engage youth in heritage preservation and teaches at the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. Ishwarya, if you could just speak a little bit about your practice, how you as a part of, as a member of community initiatives help with conserving heritage. Could you present? Is that available?
I'm just going to try to share my screen. And is it visible?
Yeah.
Okay. So great. I am a little nervous because I'm extremely excited. So just if I speak too fast, please do forgive me. So good evening and आप सबको दिल्ली से मेरा सलाम. I grew up in Delhi and I studied architecture in Delhi as well. But it's a very historic city, and my love for architecture and my love for heritage actually begins by growing up in Delhi, seeing so much heritage that intervened in our everyday lives, whether it was the schools we studied in, or the places we visited, or where we shopped on the weekends. So when I wanted to study heritage conservation, everyone sort of thought that it was a lost case, because everyone in India was really focused on building new buildings. So I had an opportunity on a fully funded British Council scholarship to go to Scotland and study urban heritage conservation. And I have to say, I learned whatever I learned about living heritage in buildings, as well as working with design in heritage, had to be from my British education. Now, why this was so important was because in that point in time in India, everything, heritage was something that you put in a showcase that you really didn't touch. You just kept it as it is, but there was no creativity or no intervention that people did with it. So the real story actually begins when I came back to India, and there were no jobs for heritage conservation. So is my slide moving? Yeah. When I came back to India after acquiring my degree, I found that there were no jobs for heritage conservation because it was more popular to and more economical to demolish buildings rather than conserve them. And heritage conservation was a subject for academic conferences and seminars. But on ground, our cities look like this, full of problems, pollution, infrastructure issues, etc. Um, Most of our urban heritage was crumbling. It was plagued by neglect, dereliction, lack of awareness, lack of access to information, expertise, and technical skills. And very often, heritage buildings were being pulled down and replaced with nondescript buildings, eroding our cities and the identity of our cities every single day. So while monuments tended to get protected and preserved, my concern was for buildings of everyday heritage, the homes we live in, the schools we study in, and the heritage that make up our cities. And like I said, that there were no jobs, so it was about inventing one. So very often, the one question that I come across is, what is everyday heritage and who defines it? Is it the expert or is it the community that cares for this heritage? Now, this is a picture from one of my earliest projects in Chandannagar, West Bengal, which was an old French trading post. And over the last 15 years, we have worked with local communities and students to build a movement to preserve, protect, and give a new lease of life to this heritage. We very often say that our first project is like our first baby, built with time, energy, passion, and most importantly, patience. So as we went about our listing, we realized that there was a lot of intangible data, memories, stories, narratives that needed to find place in the story of Chandannagar heritage. And that heritage was much more than just buildings. And it wasn't just about the people who lived back in the past, but it was about the people who live now and how do they connect to their history. And so with young volunteers and students, we spent an entire summer collecting some of these oral history stories. We attempted at bringing young people and students together through technology as well as engagement activities. I believe that students have tremendous power. Their ideas are important. And here in this picture, we had a Indo-French student competition where the students came together and worked for about 7 days. And in this picture, they are presenting their work to the decision makers. And I think this was a really important moment in time because it led us to a dialogue between the Indian and French sides. And we got to design a project which was an Indo-French equal partnership. Now, it's been a really challenging project to get off the ground. And to be very honest, it required a lot of courage to stand my ground and to find an equal place and voice. Because it was very important to steer clear of any neo-colonial discourses. It wasn't about exporting an idea and just implementing it here, but it was really important that the project was driven by local voices rather than ideas that came from Europe. And it was really difficult to do because the decision makers here didn't want to hear local voices. They wanted to hear and they wanted to import an idea because it seemed more superior. So I think there was a lot of lack of faith in our own homegrown talent, which I think is one of the problems why nothing moves off the ground. Because, we never talk about these things, but there is, of course, a racial bias. There is a lot of bias that exists in our own society about ideas that are homegrown and then ideas that are exported or imported from Europe. So usually when we look at ideas from the West, particularly when we look at case studies, when we look at bottom-up movements, there are mechanisms that support third sector or voluntary sector. And from a case study standpoint, it seems really easy. But our reality is really different. And over the years, I've realized that we need to trust our own instincts and build our own methodology. So the basic reality of the ground is, how do we preserve this heritage or how do we restore this heritage? Where do we find the traditional materials and craftsmen to do this? Um, and how do we do this? My most humbling experience was learning heritage conservation in Scotland, and then to come back to India and completely unlearn it, and then start again from the ground, bottom up, learning from craftsmen and communities, and by employing a lot of jugaad. And I believe that, there's so much wisdom in how we traditionally deal with things. In the West, they call it things like sustainability, sustainist mindset, etc. But for us, mostly it's common sense. Save as much as possible, only do as much as necessary. And so this is a picture of a student workshop that we did in 2014, which was the first time students actually came into the courtyard of a Haveli to learn how to make lime mortar. At this point, all the information was just caged and with experts. So like anyone who wanted to restore a building had to go to an expert. And actually this knowledge is like common sense. It's available with everybody, but it was packaged in such a way that most people deterred away from heritage conservation because they thought it was so complicated and nobody knew how to do it. So, like I said, the main point we realized was that most knowledge was caged, and it was really super important that to build a community initiative, it is the power of this knowledge and easy access to knowledge that builds a community movement. So we used all kinds of mediums that were available to us over the last 15, 20 years, which started with early social media like blogs, guides, books, manuals, and demystifying all of the technical words and all of the academic words around heritage conservation into really simplified things that people could understand and relate to. So, like you said, Marvi, we have also been conducting heritage walks, and I think it's one of the easiest tools for any community to come together to showcase the stories of our cities to visitors, enthusiasts, and anyone who's interested in knowing our city. And every single walk you learn something new because none of this heritage is actually recorded, and that really makes our space and our city so much more interesting. We've also been engaging with a lot of students in terms of hands-on workshops, as well as co-creation with doing things in the public realm, doing street furniture projects with upcycled old furniture. And so there's a lot of hands-on learning. There is carpentry, there is metalworking, and it actually builds a sense of ownership with the community. So when you start a project like this, 50 other people come and ask, क्या हो रहा है, what are you doing, क्यों कर रहे हो, and then slowly and steadily they join hands, and then therefore it becomes like a shared initiative. I think nobody actually builds a project without naysayers, without people wanting to know what you are doing, without people wanting to come and spread rumors that there is an ulterior motive, they're going to take away this space, they are from some corporation. I think that's what makes it's really interesting working in South Asia because there is no set model. You make a model every time for a particular site because all kinds of people will come, all kinds of people say all kinds of things. And that's when you come out of those when you navigate those situations, that's what makes the project really rich and interesting. So also, I think while
we talk, do a time check, yeah? You just have 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll be through. So when a huge part of community, initiatives depend on capacities of municipal authorities as well as custodians. And I think everything was really going well for us until we hit the lockdown. Because it was the first time we realized that there was a situation in which the architect could not be on site. And we had never worked in the virtual medium on a site. And I think that is where we realized that it was time to challenge status quo. And it was during this lockdown that we realized we needed to create something in the virtual space. And we set out to fill this gap between theory and practice with a student-led project that we floated as part of an internship program that we did at Jugadopolis, where we collaborated with young people, not just from India, but also from China and the UK. And we built what we call the restoration toolbox. Now, the restoration toolbox is not just a website or an online repository. It's actually an open source participatory platform that helps bring different kinds of communities together so that they can be empowered to take care of their heritage in a very democratic way. So you can flag a building at risk, you can build a campaign with like-minded people, you can actually work with civic authorities. The technology has been built to be able to do that. And for this, last year, our project was selected as part of the European Spaces of Culture in 2023. And actually, to be very honest, this helped upscale our project because it was the European recognition that opened doors to our local government and public policy that enabled us to have amplify local voices, that enabled us to inspire young men, children and aspiring architects through workshops, seminars. It helped us do peer-to-peer learning, as well as have a conversation on government with government on policy. It was the first time that we could get real-time feedback, how municipalities saw the toolbox and what was really needed at the ground level. And I think while we were able to build professional capacity through our internship programs, as well as talk about academic engagements and create courses on adaptive reuse and heritage for students, it provided us an opportunity for mentorship and handholding. But I think today I'm really proud to say what we've actually been able to do is create free resources for different materials and how to restore them in a very graphic and simple way. And the way we've done it is something that is applicable to all of South Asia. And I think you guys can also use these materials because the building methodologies and technologies are really simple. And all of these are available on our website. You can see it for free. So again, that comes to the most important question that haunts all of us. What happens when the funding is over? Do we shut down the good work we've been doing, or is there another way forward? So we believe that sustainability of heritage conservation lies in building relationships. So our project ended last year, but we've nurtured the relationships we built with the community, the custodians, as well as our institutional partners to continue the job we started. So last month, at one of the Havelis we restored became the venue for a student workshop on adaptive reuse. We're collaborating with like-minded people and communities on how we can move forward, what we can do as citizens, which doors to knock on, where to find the money. And we've just built this manifesto based on all our engagements, and we hope to bring together more people, communities, as well as stakeholders and policymakers at a dialogue to see how we can make heritage conservation sustainable. So I'll stop there. There's so much to say, but if you have any questions, we can talk about that. And if you want to find out more about our work, just get in touch with me because 15 minutes can't do justice to 15 years. But thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. That was very exciting, and really enjoyed the last two sections of your work. They really mean a lot as a public advocacy level. Like, how do you have a knowledge which is approachable and more on a giving level? And I think that's much needed. We will talk more about this in the last section, where we will curate like a moderated conversation around this. So we will now, Anmol, do you want to go ahead?
Here that we have is Dr. Naveed Iqbal. Dr. Naveed Iqbal is a licensed architect and assistant professor at National University of Sciences and Technology in Islamabad, Pakistan. He holds a PhD from Hasselt University, Belgium, where he specialized in adaptive reuse, architecture, and heritage management. His research focuses on adaptive reuse in developing countries and industrial sites in the West. Dr. Iqbal has published extensively in journals and conferences. So that will be all from me. And Dr. Naveed Iqbal, are you here with us?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. My presentation kind of a bit of a kind of formal presentation. I would like to talk about like the future of heritage, because most of the time we talk about like the heritage and its past, but what are we going to do with the current heritage for our future generation? So my talk will be mostly about the future of the heritage, and what we can call like the perfect future heritage project. I think the introduction was already done by the colleague, but I would like to just add a few lines to that. I did my master in interior architecture, adaptive reuse, from Belgium, and before that, I was working in the field in Islamabad for a couple of years, and after my master, I did my PhD on the industrial legacy of Pakistan and its identification, potential, and recognition. Uh, so as I mentioned earlier, like we most of the time we talk about the heritage, its value, um the history of the heritage. Uh, but what we are going to do with it for the future generation in this kind of ever changing world. Uh, so I would like to share my experience in one of our conference that I attended in Prague, Czech Republic, where we visited a site called Vinitro Block in Prague, Czech Republic. It was an old industrial site which was supposed to be demolished. It was a historical industrial site, uh, but it was abandoned. So there were two friends, kind of entrepreneurs, who uh, kind of stepped forward and proposed an idea of adaptive reuse for this site, and they started a kind of signature cafe in that site, and from that moment onward, they were adding stuff and were involving the community around the site. And eventually, it became a kind of community center for the youth and the people around that site. So at first it was a kind of signature cafe, but later on they involved more people from the community, and it was kind of bottom of process, where later on homemade soup, cakes, live DJs, art exhibitions, DIY workshops, and a movie theater. These kind of things were added on later on, and eventually the site was preserved, and instead of demolition were kind of adaptively used for a new function by the community and for the community. So in this image, you can see on the left hand side is a platform. It was a kind of existing structure of the industrial site, and it was converted into a cafe. Some seating areas were introduced in that area, and it's some light intervention. The site was kind of reused for new function. You can see the walls. It was in existing condition. Uh, you can feel the spirit of there. Says the space still looks like an industrial site with kind of new function. And one of the things that I liked about the site was like the defects were not kind of uh, plastered away from it, but instead was uh, utilized as a kind of strength of their side. It's like the kintsugi concept from the Japanese concept, where the defects are kind of more elaborated in a new way, and it becomes the strength of their project. So on the left hand side, you can see a crack in the wall. It was covered with a transparent glass, and now you can see like sneak peek of the outside activities. And at the right hand side of the image, you can see the graffiti and the layers of the buildings on the wall. So the palimpsestic quality of the structure was kind of retained instead of just plastering it away. So currently the project is being used by a variety of people, and the people who are working where there are from the community. There is a cafe, there is a shoe shop, there are some exhibition spaces which are used by the local community. Our conference was also organized in that space, where the food was provided by the people who are working were there. So it's a really lively environment now over there, and the local community and specifically the youth really enjoy that site. and the students from the university, they just come and sit over there, have a coffee, and can study in this area. So for me, I think this was the kind of project which you can say community-led initiative, and it is for the community by the community. I will talk a little bit about my PhD research. I completed my PhD quite recently. I think to be exact, it was 6 months ago. So my research was on industrial sites and its adaptive reuse potential. So I studied the case study in the Western world and compared it with the case studies in Pakistan. So on the left-hand side, you can see a case study from Old Port of Montreal. It's Darling Brothers Foundry. It was an industrial site which is converted into modern art center by the local artists, and it's currently used as a exhibition space for the modern art. On the right hand side, you can see similar kind of buildings in at Karachi Port. It's Berth 1517A. I think Ms. Marvi has already worked on this site. Uh, I visited it, I think, a year and a half ago. It's still most of the part is currently not in use. It's kind of abandoned, and I think overall the Karachi port, which is really rich historically, is not accessible by the for the public. So I think by using such kind of buildings and adaptively using it, kind of industrial sites in Pakistan, which is already such kind of systems are already developed by Canadian government, and also the NED University were working on heritage sites in Karachi. But my research was specifically on industrial site to. So the first steps were to identify such kind of uh, recognize such kind of sites and then identify it, and then the next stage can be fabrication and management of such kind of site. But at the moment, we don't have any medium where we can look at to kind of enlist such kind of sites. So I think the first thing can be step can be the recognition of such kind of site, and later on we can work on such kind of site. So these are some of the publication that I did during my research. If somebody want to visit it, they can look at on ResearchGate or Google Scholar. Uh, that's on from my side. Thank you. I will stop.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naveed. Really appreciate it. Yeah, your project is important in many ways, but also one needs to realize that it's a heavily there's a lot of heavy surveillance in that zone. So creating a
Yeah.
heritage management plan for that is going to be quite critical and quite a challenging aspect. We worked on that building. I think I could kind of recognize the picture. I think it's from one of our documentations. So yeah, I mean, these sites which have been overtaken by the forces is something, again, these are public, we pay taxes, and we this is a heritage of the city, of the area. And it is important to kind of create these kind of outline and frameworks, but this framework should not be just restricted to research level.
Dr. Naveed Iqbal for joining us and sharing your presentation with us. So next up we have Paras Mahmood Shah. Paras Mahmood is currently the Chief Conservator or Director at Archives Conservation Laboratories in Pakistan, with over a decade of experience in heritage conservation. Trained in Italy, she has restored and digitized over 20,000 holdings at Pir Husamuddin Rushdie Memorial Library since 2015. Her widely published research focuses on
I'm currently working as the Chief Restorer at Archives Conservation Laboratory, and I'll be telling you more about it. So this is... when we're talking about the preservation, and secondly, I would also like to, that we have many architects on board and already people who have a lot to share on the conservation of monuments and sites. And our basic concern here, especially with my field, is the preservation of archives, which are completely neglected, not only in Pakistan, but this is one of the menace that we have all around the world. I've done my study in paper restoration and preservation from Italy, and also the preservation of heritage from Bocconi University in Italy, specializing in paper-based and parchment-based materials. So this is what I learned from experiences in Italy as well, that this is just one menace, because we, as when the preservation of archives is spoken of, we lie right at the bottom of the hierarchy, because overall the mindset is that is the least important thing on the hierarchy of heritage objects. So this is at its best, preservation of heritage engages the past in a conversation with the present over a mutual concern for the future, according to William Murgaard. Libraries and archival collections. We keep on saying this even in our training, because our basic, the idea is to create a lot of ownership awareness for our archival collections, because they are one of the unparalleled resources of documenting history and culture. They are library and archival collections. They contain a wealth of human knowledge and artistic expressions, providing information on the existence of different civilization and cultural effluence of a nation. However, the efforts given to restoring monuments and architecture are not on par given to the restorative efforts for books and manuscripts, the process of which is quite complex and requires research, expertise, and experience. Therein lies our challenge, and this is a global challenge that we face. Some of the common aspects of heritage that frame a country's cultural landscape are monuments and buildings, historical sites, artifacts, ceramics, paintings, murals, and the last of the hierarchies, archives. Some of the common functions of archival bodies. Now, this is not only the duty and the main responsibility of government archival bodies, but also the duty of citizens. The main functions of archives are the management and the preservation of records. So what we do is we acquire records, we arrange them, we provide service access to them. The preservation is our responsibility, outreach programs and exhibitions, microfilming, and records management and appraisals. These are some of the basic functions of archival bodies. Like I said, most of the focus here in South Asian countries and all over the world lies on restoring heritage sites, including buildings and monuments. Even though South Asia's rich heritage comprises of 50% of its history, which lies on pieces of paper and parchment and other materials in forms of both tangible and intangible heritage. Yet we greatly lack research into preservation of our rich written legacies. Not only that, they are completely neglected, they are completely ignored till a major chunk of history is lost to utter negligence. Also, archival heritage is an important aspect that provides a connection to the history of all other aspects of heritage. The core essence of the creation of an heritage object, elaborating the thought and idea of its existence. For example, when you try to conserve or restore a monument or a building, of course, the work that has been done for the designing of that building and monument has a major history of its archival architectural drawings and maps. So the same thing goes for frescoes and murals. The artist creates thousands of sketches. That actually is the actual vision or the view of the picture that is going on in his mind before that actual heritage object or building or fresco or mural is created. So that all lies on pieces of paper, parchment, bamboo, leaves. There are a variety of material which are completely ignored. This is the general state of important archives in Pakistan. I'm sorry, but I had to show this because this is the general state that we go and sit in, and we try to organize these things. We clean them, we restore them, and then we display the important tangible and intangible data out of these. In 2005, I guess Marvi would be knowing about it. There was an important case study in which historic colonial records were found like this in gunny bags, and they were thrown away to rainwater, and a major chunk of history was lost. That is why we internationally raise this volume on international podiums, that we think that the entire world considers archives as a stepchild among the family of heritage objects. everybody would be knowing about this famous architecture in Karachi. It is called the Frere Hall Library, and many restorative efforts and conservative efforts have been done to secure the actual monuments, and a lot of hue and cry has been created for it. But this is the actual state of the archives that are inside this Frere Hall Library. They are inundated with dust and a lot of negligence, rainwater, seepage, humidity, insect attacks, pest attacks, and these are the kind of conditions. Now, this was an iconic library that was actually built. The community would join together. They were holding functions, and then it was a kind of a library which is in the state at the moment. The actual books, and these are all important colonial records that are lying there in a neglected state. So this was some of the survey that we had conducted. This actually gave us the vision that, I mean, this is the state of archives, and not only in Pakistan but all across South Asia. So some of the most common threats that we face in South Asia are, of course, the lack of interest in ownership, the negligence, the inappropriate practices in handling the heritage objects, limited resources, and we are riddled with that, lack of expertise, lack of funding, lack of government support. And one of the major things is ownership battles that is very common in our country. In order to overcome these challenges, of course, community plays a major role in safeguarding and preservation of heritage. It is not only the task of the government to protect them, but every citizen is responsible in protecting its heritage. It is to keep in mind that community-led revitalization results in greater output in terms of preservation. That is achieving the long-term goal in terms of its preservation when the community is actually active and working its way towards the preservation of that object, and also towards its short-term goals in terms of research, education, and entertainment. After looking at the state of archives, and of course, we were handling the historic library of Pir Osamuddin Rashti, who is a famous scholar, author, historian, historiographer, linguist. When we started handling the important archives, and just Pir Osamuddin Rashti's library comprises of 7 to 8% of Pakistan's entire archival treasures, and approximately from 36 to 37% of only Sindh's archival treasures. So it is in terms of its massive the collection and books and the research material of Pir Sahib, it holds a high universal value. So when we started handling the treasures of the Rashti's Memorial Library, we realized the kind of problems and the environmental degradation factors that had played a part in the deterioration of those books and treasures. Therefore, Archives Conservation Laboratory started as a small organization to save Pakistan's archival treasures in 2020. It started off as an umbrella of Pir Osamuddin Rashti's library, but as soon as we put our hands in those in the projects, simultaneously other national archives just started pouring in. Why? Because we have a lack of expertise, a lack of knowledge of handling even the basic protocol of handling our paper-based collections. Therefore, people just started, these archives started pouring in. Also, handling valuable archives consisting of thousands of historic manuscripts, books and photographs, research materials and letters with meager resources. We did not have any resources. So when we say that COVID put lockdown and stuff, yes, it was a difficult time for us because there was no government the support for us, nothing of that sort. We had to stand on our own feet, but that gave us enough time to collect and to categorize the data and to create a roadmap of how we would be restoring those treasures. Also, the lack of resources leads to important archives and books and library institute of conservation, which is a global body that how in the face of lack of funding, how do we save larger library collections? And this is because restoration of paper archives involves massive funding, and the government was not ready to help. And then there were huge, humongous a number of other problems that we were facing at that time. So we devised cost-effective methodologies which takes out sustainable solutions out of the environment, and they help in the management of larger library collections. I'm sure everybody here is aware of NEEM as an effective tool for archives and library collections. We started growing more neem trees, especially where there were more libraries. Even during the restoration process and the infestation, to save the archives from the infestation attacks of certain types of insects, neem was used because it has been used since centuries as an Ayurvedic medicine. So this really helped us. Simultaneously, we were helping the environment by the plantation of more neem trees. Also, strategies were devised for pest infestations, environmental degradation factors. Trainings were given to students and professionals for mass awareness. All preserved tangible and intangible data was promoted through exhibitions. This is what happens internationally. So this is, if you can see, this is how we conduct our research, the spot test and the restoration. And then this is the recent exhibition of 450 letters that we had put up in Islamabad, consisting of a correspondence of Pir Samuddin Rashdi with Dr. Annemarie Schimmel, both notable known scholars of Pakistan. And here we having these training sessions for students to create mass awareness for archival preservation. This is just before the start of the exhibition. This is all on the walls is the intangible data that was derived out of these 450 letters, because there was a massive collection of the promotion of literature and languages through the correspondence of both of these notable scholars, and that had to be promoted. Apart from the tangible promotion here, with the actual preserved letters were put on display, and the intangible data was all put up on the walls to give the audience a clear view about it. Because I'm sure this is also what we faced, is when we just restore the actual letter, nobody takes interest out of it, till the intangibility of the entire thing is promoted through different audiovisual and effective guides. Just some of the things of importance out of that. And also we create a lot of awareness through publications and promotions, because nobody heeds an eye on manuscripts and the preservation. So just something on our part that we play. And these are just some of the images, the actual, the type of documents that we get for restoration, the condition of the documents. And here you can see the team working on it. And we give it, we assemble the pieces, it's restored, it's preserved, it's cleaned, it's deacidified, and then it is put up for display. So of course, the community-led preservation has a lot of advantage, and the national advantage, of course, being of education and research, training, public awareness, participation, access to information, international cooperation, raising funds, cooperation between public and private sectors, and inculcating part ownership among the participants. And the most important thing that I would like to just lastly notify here is the inclusion of conservation in curriculum for university levels. And this is what I've been saying since a long time, because even to learn techniques of conservation and preservation, we have to step out of Pakistan to gain the expertise. But there should be an inclusion of conservation and preservation of different heritage aspects into our university curriculum and graduate and postgrad studies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paras. Really appreciate it. Your work is quite commendable, and been following it for some time, and it was a pleasure to share a platform as well with you recently. So if you could just stop sharing the screen, and just going to like kind of compile on the fact that, yes, preservation of the paper is something that is lacking the conversation amongst the mainstream preservation understanding. And in the idea of when we were thinking about modern heritage in South Asia, there are some master architects and who are building some incredible stuff in the modern times in the last 40 to 50 years, even thinking about Art Deco. There is so much content when it comes to drawings and visual data that it is unbelievable that none of that information is on public level. It is either been like, others are doing it on behalf of us, but we ourselves don't have any repository. And another very unfortunate thing that has come up is the public repository where people give their own assets into a state level space. So for example, when I was doing documentation of the Parsi colony, there were so many people, families who did not have children, who didn't have any inheritance plan, and they wanted to give it to the state. But there was a missing gap. They didn't have the platform to actually donate. And this idea is something that we can expand more in our later conversation and talk about this public repository system where people are trusting the system to give in, and then one can think about larger archives. So on this note, Anmol, our second last panel.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paras, for sharing your work. On to the next person. So next up we have Rabab Fatma Chisti. Rabab Fatma Chisti is an architect based in Pakistan. Her professional training began at Nayar Ali Dada and Associates, where she was deeply involved in design work. Her passion for conservation led her to establish a design firm specializing in the restoration of historic architecture. She is currently focused on rehabilitating and restoring Gurdwara.
I graduated from Beacon House National University in 2018, and I started working. I started my own firm right after that. I got a project that was my thesis. It's called Gurdwara Chiva Sahab, and now it's been restored. It's been 2 years. Now the Gurdwara is in the caretaking of Acute Trust Property and Sikh Prabandhak Committee. So I would like to share some of my work that to encourage people, young people, to get into this, get into the historical, archival, historical data compilation. So these are the few buildings that I've restored. I'm sorry. Okay, so these are the few buildings that I've restored since I started restoring. I started documenting buildings from 2015 when I was a student. The Al Singh Library was the first ever building that I documented. So there are a few Sikh buildings. So I do lean towards the Sikh heritage because that is the area that I've. Okay, so this is the project I restored. It was my thesis in working with restoration a lot. So that was the site. It was abandoned since the partition, and the Gurdwara itself was 110 years old. The Sarovar, and the latter building, the first floor and second floor was built in Ranjit Singh time, but the first floor was built before that. So the architecture, so what we do is we identified the kind of architectural elements it uses. Then we identified the time period through the elements, kind of arches and columns that they're using. So if you see, there's like two different times of architecture you talk about when you look at two different arches. One is pointed arch, the other one is Surahi arch, which is purely Sikh architecture. Then we document the building and make architectural plans, which are like as per built. Then we made an ideal elevation based on what it was like, and we took references from Sikh architecture around us in the in the region, Punjab. So that was based on how we incorporate the temporary. We do not damage the building by provide services to the building. This is another visual diagram of how we incorporated the plumbing system, electric MEP, and electrical systems. So this is what the Gurdwara looked like initially when I documented it for my thesis. It was 2018. I got the project in 2020, so I started working on it. So when I went there, it was more or less like this. The windows were installed. There was a lot of cement work being done. So we started to taking off all the with time intervention things on the building, which included a lot of cement work, cement gumtis at the top. Then we figured out that the facade had something else to it by the lithograph we found from the archives. In 1834, it was documented, and we realized there was few arches. We started to taking off the plaster and new bricks that we found. We found these arches on the facade. Then we kept digging and doing whatever was needed to get rid of all the layers. After the partition layers of restorations, we ended up getting something like this. We cleaned the building with toothbrushes and lime solution, and we could only clean the brick, and we could not put the toothbrush on the mortar. So it took us 6 months to just clean the building and get the original facade out of it. We had about 60 people working on the Gurdwara because we didn't have a lot of time. After that, we started to restore. So this is the stage when we have it all exposed. So there is no old interventions, new interventions on the buildings. And this is what it looked like after the removal of all the cement. And then we started restoring it, and we plastered the ground floor because it was too damaged to be saved. So where did we from Nanak Shahi bricks? We got them made from High Peru, and we got the sizes. We reinstalled the bricks, recreated the pattern, recreated the geometry, plastered the whole thing because it had to be a functional Gurdwara. So the client was very particular about how it looks eventually. So we wanted to leave it as it is, where we found it with the bricks, and preserve it. But the client wanted it to be plastered, so we did that. So this is the all the materials. So the process not just encompass the restoration work, it has a lot of research behind it. We did a lot of material combinations, we got all the old materials tested and made new ones on site with a lot of experimentations with ratios. And we had this is how it was, and this is how it is now. All the details were completed with the references of Sikh architecture from archives and from the buildings that we could see around that were in a better place. So that is the inside of the Gurdwara. It was all plastered, and it had almost seven layers of paint. So we removed all of them and exposed the original brick interior. So this is the final look of the Gurdwara, what it looks like now. This was the interpretation of how we wanted it. So this is the project that I restored. After that and before that, we kept doing documentation of the building, and that is the whole point of this presentation, because we are architects, to the sites, and we start documenting whatever we see. So this is Bhai Karam Singh Gurdwara. It was in Jhelum. Because we were in Jhelum working for 2 years, we had a lot of time. So we documented Bhai Karam Singh Gurdwara, made its drawings, get it cleaned on our own, recorded all the architectural features to the degree that we have the capacity to. After that, we went to Punjab, and it was allotted to me by ETPB. The project was allotted to me by ETPB, so they wanted to revamp the facade of the Punjab. So this is what we did. Removed the interventions of new times and took it to the past, and we tried to make it as closer to the old image that we found on internet. Then this is another research project that I did on our own. This is Targe. This was in Kasur. We were going to Kasur. We saw the building and we thought we should document that. And these are the drawings of the building. This is how it looks now. And then we realized that it was documented 5 years ago, and it was in a way better condition to the what it is now. Then we designed a few monuments for Sikh people that is very commercial. So the thing about the community, so basically there were 4 things that we figured out in the project. The role of community in the heritage preservation. Initially, when we went to Jhelum, we could not engage a lot of people. Nobody was willing to talk to us because we were doing a Sikh Gurdwara. So that was a very basic, I would say, basic tension between us and people. So we started to talk to them. Then the client introduced the langar culture. So we had to prepare the langar for everybody, whoever walks and not for Sikh. We had a few Hindu labor, few Sikh people, and a lot of Muslim labor. So it was already, the site was already an interfaith, already had the interfaith harmony sorted. So we started inviting people to langar. They would come to us, have food, and that's how we got all the cultural and historical data through interviews, through talks, through sessions. And then we started taking people from that community and started training them how to chisel the brick, how to make material. And so this is Ustad Baki. He is the stucco artist that we had, and he trained about 5 to 6 labor people. Then we trained a few people on site, how to install the bricks, how to insert the bricks, how to cut them, how to morph them according to the shape that we require. Then we started, so this is the ground floor facade. Then we kept doing it, and at the end of the project, we were able to promote 5 Mazdoor to the rank of the plaster guys, and then 5 masons to the rank of 3 masons to the rank of stucco artist and fresco artist. So that is, I think, that is what we did in our capacity, you know, and whatever we could do. And in terms of community, the lack I found on site was mostly about they don't want to own anything that doesn't belong to Musliman. So it was a very big conflict. So they were like, why are you restoring the Sikh? Then we started talking to them and making them realize, I'm talking about a big community, about 300 houses in Rohtas, and we went to them, we spoke to them. There was a gown in front of it, and we made them realize that whatever is here is yours, so you need to take care of it. And then after we left, we have been told that a lot of people are coming there, they just clean the building, they cut the greenery and all that, so they are taking care of whatever we tried to put their minds on. I would stop the screen. So basically, the whole purpose of this presentation was to tell you how on your personal level you can, just play your role. You don't need to have a foundation to fund you. You don't need, if you have a vision how to go about it, I think then you can make a difference. And if we were able to train our labor to the mason level and our masons to the stucco person level, I think everybody
we would like to correlate it and kind of talk academically. What does it do when we are having a Kartarpur corridors and we're opening it up from that border perspective? What does these nexus do, and what kind of relationship do these landmarks make? Do they merge into the context? And it'll also be interesting to hear your methodology from the perspective of how were you training the workers, and how were you training the approach of like sharing the knowledge of why Sikh architecture preservation is important. Because in a context where they're saying Musliman and Hindu architecture and Sikh architecture are separate, what is the methodology of what you were applying over there? Was it through workshops? Was it through conversation? Would like to hear more on that, because documentation preservation aspect is important, but the topic of this session is about community-led revitalization. So let's kind of like conclude on that idea of how would you share that methodology with us in the last part. Over to you, Anmol.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabab, for sharing this presentation with us. Next up, we have two more people left on this panel. So we will quickly be moving on to, Zara Suhail Manan, and then we will come back to Syed Nur Hussain. So Zara Suhail Manan. Zara Suhail Manan is the founder of Kitabkar, a citizen-funded library in Lahore that is open 7 days a week. She completed her bachelor's in English with a
it's been really interesting to be a part of this chat today. I've gotten heritage preservation, generally architectural preservation is a big interest of mine, and to hear it in detail from so many different voices has been great. My presentation, I guess, is going to be a bit of in the opposite direction, whereas as in there wasn't a lot of science or engineering or even art involved, well, some art involved in what we did, but it was kind of a perchance opportunity for us to help maintain the sanctity of a place, a process that was had already been started by the person who was living here. So yeah, we have a public library. It's a citizen-funded public library in Rahmanpura, Ichra, Lahore. And today I'm going to talk about how we ended up making this library and how it served as an effort in community-led revitalization. So the library was actually a friend's family home, and we knew about this place because on the first floor, my friend Shazeb had turned his own, जिस कमरे में वो sort of बड़ा हुआ था, he had turned it into like a music studio. And it was just a balcony area with a very small room, and he turned it into a music studio, and he would host fun events. His family had moved into the suburban city, DHA type, and they'd sort of left this house that they'd owned, this pre-partition building that had been built in 1931. Back for sort of के इसको rent करेंगे या कुछ करेंगे, yes, we'll see what we can do about it. And the reason for that migration also was kind of the deterioration of that urban space. एक ज़माने में इस इचरा में जब ये लोग इस यहाँ रह रहे थे, या इनके जब अब्बू इस घर में बड़े हुए थे, तो there were green spaces around, and it was like that urban space was fully functional. How an educated person of civil society standing would want their urban space to look like, but because of, I guess, deteriorating developmental standards in that area, the urban environment generally deteriorated, and now people didn't want to live here, but people wanted to rent the place out for some sort of commercial or semi-commercial hostel type, some sort of use that would still make owning the place kind of profitable, but also have its purpose entirely transformed. Now Shazeb was attached to the place, so he'd grown up there, and he'd sort of saved the first floor as this place where he'd set up a little music community. And I'm a musician myself, and that's how we sort of found out about this place. Now, fast forward 2 years later, when Shazeb was also leaving the country, his father had sort of told him that since you're going, I'm going to offer this place for cheap rent to like a sofon ka karkhana, or some sort of activity like that wouldn't need a lot of sort of renovation required for the place, and the place could still be used in whatever way it could be used. And Shazeb wanted to see before he gives up this space that he'd kind of created a community center out of to some sort of a commercial, semi-commercial activity, iska kya ho sakta hai? And that's where I got involved, and our team got involved, and we tried out what was to us a bit of a crazy idea. And these were some of when we talked about a community center, these were some of the questions that we were asking ourselves, right? कि community centers जिस तरह जो आपकी public services होती हैं, जो आपकी state ने अपनी constitution में भी promise की हुई हैं, right? कि because आपके पास right to education है, right to assembly है, right to fla है, right to fla है, the state has offered has made some promises that your commitment and your deference to us comes with these sorts of privileges. So वो जो privileges होते हैं, जो public services के privileges होते हैं, वो क्या privileges होते हैं? That was the first question, how we were understanding कि community center क्या होता है. और अभी जो ग्रोइंग सॉर्ट ऑफ न्यू कॉलोनियल और आपका जो न्यू लिबरल इकोनॉमिक मॉडल है जिस पे सारे ममालिक चल रहे हैं, स्पेशली बिकॉज ऑफ वर्ल्ड बैंक, IMF एंड इंटरनेशनल सॉर्ट ऑफ US backed pressure, all these services that were once part of public service offering are already finding their monetized iterations, and the state once again is sort of rupturing into these two demographics where if you can pay for it, you wouldn't send your kid to a public school. If you can pay for it, you wouldn't need to use public service. So as like a privileged citizen, you wouldn't then be concerned about the nature of the public service, and then the public service can become a different kind of a domain for the government. We wanted our idea to have a sustainability in the place that we were setting it up in. So we wanted to ask ourselves कि ये जो promises जो state हमारा state religion या हमारा state religion make करता है, जो promises हमें as a community as an अवाम अच्छे लगते हैं, ये promises क्या होते हैं? और हमने इससे बहुत ज़्यादा sort of जो inspiration थी, मेरा एक दोस्त है जो इस्माइली है, जो अपने इस्माइली जमात खानों के बारे में जब बात करता है तो वो बड़े फ़ख्र से बताता है कि हमारे जो बड़े जमात खाने होते हैं उसमें प्रेइंग जो वर्शिप वाला एरिया है उस पे पहुंचने से पहले आप लाइब्रेरी से गुजरते हो और एक कम्युनिटी सेंटर मोमेंट से गुजरते हो जहाँ कम्युनिटी के अपडेट्स भी होती हैं, लाइब्रेरी होती है, नई बुक्स ऑफर हो रही होती हैं. एंड आई वाज रियली इंस्पायर्ड बाय दैट स्टोरी बिकॉज इवन फॉर मी ग्रोइंग अप in Pakistan in a Muslim household, this idea of ilm, this idea of equality, true equity, this idea of sort of a shared empathy with the different facets of society, these were all parts of my religious and cultural upbringing. And all of these questions then synthesized into कि Pakistan की cultural heritage क्या है. And like any group of Gen Z kids, we were excited by the fact that yeah, this is a pre-partition building, and inshallah if we do something to it, it will be like preserving a beautiful part of this landmass's history, right? The landmass that was not a nation state divided on the lines of religion. So we were really excited that this was a 1931's ka house that had traveled its hands between Hindu, Sikh and Muslim families and was a representation of Lahore's cultural heritage. And our idea sort of synthesized with these three principles into a library. We wanted to make this effort of community revitalization be one that worked on the principle of adding color back, because we were kind of shocked by the grayness of dereliction, right? How gray neglect always looks. And so we wanted to respond to that with color, because we believe our history of जिस तरह आप सारों के काम में हमने देखा, right, those like mosaic tile works and those like colored histories of our cultural heritage are very important restorations of any part of even like big monument that were made by high society. Care was what we believed was a central principle, and those things leading into community. And the result was this public library. So you guys saw the images of what the library looked like before, and safe from using the electrician's help and the carpenter's help. A lot of painting the walls and painting these stained glasses. This was done by hand by all our sort of community members who were part of the vision on what this revitalization will look like from the get-go. And only when I'm sitting in this session am I looking at this process as part of this like एक area की urban revitalization and preservation. But to be honest, to us kids, and yeah, I was the oldest person involved, and I was 24 years old at this time, and the rest of my team of girls, we were between 18 years old to 22 years old. And for us, actually, it was a revitalization for Lahore, the city, because we were these city kids, right? Not really associated emotionally with any particular part of the city, but with the larger urban identity of Lahore. And to want to give Lahore a space, this was a part of revitalizing what we thought was a growingly neoliberal Lahore. And for anyone who's experienced Lahore in the past, I think 10 to 20 years, you must have seen how our beautiful city of gardens, which is still quite a city of gardens, is going through kind of a devastating neoliberalization projects, right? Where it's like flyover pe underpass pe flyover, and I mean, like a part of me is proud of the development, but also one wonders how better this development could have been if, yeah, once again, these principles of color, care, community, and actual cultural heritage preservation could be put forward. So this picture is from today. This is what our library looks like in the middle of Rahmanpura's Ichra Bazaar. Ichra is one of the oldest localities of Lahore, and as you can see, it's gone through what happens to many a sort of yeah, growingly neglected urban environments जो center होती हैं एक ज़माने में और फिर उनको like neglect से decenter किया जा रहा होता है किसी और force से, कि उसमें क्या होता है कि उसमें आप हर तरह की green space ख़त्म कर देते हो, आप गलियाँ आपकी छोटी हो जाती हैं. पुराने ज़माने में ये छोटी गलियों के कुछ different infrastructures थे that kept them sort of functional. You like overwrite those structures with all sorts of like cement solutions that fail every few years. And as you can also see, okay, we're one of the only green moments in this picture. And this like little ये जो बेल उगी हुई है, और ये शाहजेब ने ही बेल उस दिन लगाई थी जब उसने डिसाइड किया था कि वो म्यूजिक सेंटर सा बनाएगा अपने कमरे में. और आज तक ये sort of बेल kind of like life preservation का example है on the street. And yeah, I think that sort of revitalizing that space with that intention, and also in conversation with the subcontinent's history, because किताब घराने एक बड़े बहुत पुराना कॉन्सेप्ट होता था प्री कॉलोनियल टाइम में कि आपकी सारी पब्लिशिंग, प्रिंटिंग, स्क्रिप्ट राइटिंग सिखाना वगैरह, और आपका जो चाय खाना कैफ़े टाइप सा होता था, टैवर्न टाइप, वो किताब घर होते थे, और वो बड़ी चीज़ें होती थी. So we've had these big ideas. I mean, if it was up to me, there would have been a calligrapher at the library at all times and immediate publishing happening. But we have a printer and we have lots of reading spaces, and we are publishing slowly but surely. And these are just some pictures of the kind of community events we've had. People reach out to us, and our feminist economic model, that we don't accept any funding, by the way, from the government, and we do not accept any funding from any imperial or colonial forces. So even though the British Council funds are very attractive, we do not take any of them, and we run entirely on a civic principle. Okay, if the civil society needs and wants a library, is it ready to commit itself to running it, just as we commit ourselves on the national scale? So if we sort of yeah, like it's a bit of a dreamy it's a bit of a dreamy aspiration, but the idea is, if we erase the need for the state for a community to have a very important public benefit on, what would the nature of that public benefit be? Public benefit look like? And आप लोगों को पता ही है कि पाकिस्तान की ब्यूरोक्रेसी और ब्यूरोक्रेटिक हिस्ट्री की वजह से हमारी जो सारी पब्लिक लाइब्रेरीज हैं लाहौर में, हमें बार बार सिर्फ कॉलें आके यही हैरान होते हैं लोग कि हम बस कोई भी बुक लेके आ सकते हैं और हम कोई भी लैपटॉप ले आ सकते हैं, एंड इट्स टोटली ओके. एंड because all the public libraries that Pakistan offers them has so many rules and so much surveillance and so much sort of bureaucratic hurdles that people just don't even want to go there if they don't have to. So yeah, superseding the state has kind of allowed us to do things that I don't of incredible events at our Adbi Mela. We have been able to host solidarity conferences and screenings for the Baloch Women's March, which is a controversial topic in our country. Another thing we wouldn't be allowed to do had we been tethered to certain institutions. And yeah, this is what our little effort into community Revitalization looks like. This is our team. And yeah, it's us, the founders and kind of the patrons on the left, and then Rashid and Bilal run the space. Rashid is an intersex individual from Bahawalnagar who also lives at Kitab Ghar and is going through their gender affirming procedure while living and working at Kitab Ghar. So we're very proud to also offer a sort of shelter to people who otherwise don't even find employment or a safe space in the country. And we that's our little library, and thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Zara. This was great for sharing. And I really enjoyed hearing about the human investment aspect to it. Recently, I have been, like in the last 3 years, been advocating towards cultural zakat, coming from the civil society, rather coming out from donor agencies. So really something that these models, and we need to collaborate and form more alliances on this sort of template, and think about like how these are counter conversations towards what we've been told that this is the way to run an organization or a small space or a large space. So these discourses are super important. I'm really proud to own a Dhalta Suraj. Recently I got that, and I'm really looking forward to reading that in my summer break. So thank you so much for this incredible work. I wish you had spoken more about your publications and the kind of things that's happening in the research part. So maybe we can take that conversation at the end and listen more about how you're also thinking about not just counter spaces, but also counter publication systems. Loved the paper material, loved how the book feels. So all of those politics of choosing, I think Paris would really enjoy listening to from that aspect, that how you are thinking about materiality. And that is also stemming from your space itself. So we can open up that at the end. So we are here at our last leg, and Anmol, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Zara, for sharing your work. And lastly, we have Syed Noor Hussain. So,
सबसे पहले तो थैंक यू सो मच फॉर द इनविटेशन, और सबको सुनने का इट वाज अ रियली गुड एक्सपीरियंस. बहुत डिफरेंट किस्म के जो है वो बैकग्राउंड के लोग जो हैं वो आए हुए हैं, उन्होंने अपना एक्सपीरियंस शेयर किया है. अच्छा, मैं जो हूँ आज थोड़ा सा अपना एक्सपीरियंस शेयर करूंगा और थोड़ा सा एक आप कह सकते हैं कि थ्योराइजेशन की कोशिश करूंगा. आई वाज थिंकिंग कि ये शायद सेशन थोड़ा स्टूडेंट्स की तरफ या जो हमारी यंग जनरेशन है उनकी तरफ गेयर्ड होगा, तो मैंने थोड़ा सा उसको जहन में रखते हुए जो है वो थोड़ा सा इस प्रेजेंटेशन को डिज़ाइन किया है. तो पॉइंट ये है कि जो हमारी अभी आप कह सकते हैं कि यूथ है या जनरल पब्लिक है या मैसेज हैं, बेसिकली उन तक ये मैसेज पहुंचाना बहुत ही ज़रूरी है कि जो हमारी हेरिटेज है या हमारी जो भी ये पुरानी आप कह सकते हैं कि बिल्डिंग्स हैं या वैसे भी कोई कल्चरल हेरिटेज है, उसको प्रिजर्व करना क्यों इतना इम्पोर्टेंट है. तो मैं स्टार्ट करूंगा बेसिकली एक थॉट एक्सपेरिमेंट से, और ये एक गुरुद्वारा है, और ये कोई मेन गुरुद्वारा नहीं है. ये तुलंबा एक छोटा सा शहर है खानेवाल के पास, और वहाँ पे ये एक पुराना गुरुद्वारा है, और उसकी सिर्फ एक दो जो वॉल्स हैं वो अब रिमेनिंग है, और उसके अंदर आप देख सकते हैं कि सिर्फ एक ब्रिक है, ब्रिक्स की लेयर्स हैं, उसके ऊपर आपको ये जो है थोड़ी सी रिलीजियस इंस्क्रिप्शन नजर आ रही है. तो इंटरेस्टिंग चीज ये है जो मैं पॉइंट यहाँ पे लोगों को चाह रहा हूँ कि वो ग्रास्प करें, वो ये है कि देखें ये बिल्डिंग ऑलमोस्ट जो है अपने इख्तिताम को पहुंच चुकी है ऑलरेडी. इंक्रोचमेंट होके और बहुत से और इश्यूज की वजह से सारी की सारी स्पेस जो है वो ऑलरेडी ऑक्यूपाई कर चुके हैं, लोग वहाँ पे घर बना चुके हैं, काफी सारी जो इसकी वॉल्स हैं वो टूट चुकी हैं, और अब सिर्फ जो वहाँ पे रह गए आर दीज फ्यू लाइंस ऑफ ब्रेक्स, एक दो वॉल्स रह गई हैं. तो ये मैंने कुछ टाइम पहले डॉक्यूमेंट की थी, एंड आई वाज थिंकिंग कि यार विद इन 10 years जो मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है कि हो सकता है ये भी वॉल्स कोई तोड़ देगा, ये ब्रिक्स उतार देगा, यहाँ पे कोई अपना घर बना लेगा, और इवेंचुअली इन 30 और 50 years देयर विल नॉट बी अ सिंगल पर्सन अलाइव जिसको याद और लिविंग मेमोरी में कि कोई गुरुद्वारा था. ऑलरेडी वहाँ पे कोई ऐसा शख्स नहीं था, ऑल आई कैन फाइंड वाज एक बहुत ही बूढ़ा आदमी था जिसके एक्चुअल लिविंग मेमोरी में था कि गुरुद्वारा है. तो पॉइंट ये है कि विद इन 50 years ऐसा कोई बंदा एग्जिस्ट नहीं करेगा जिसको पता होगा कि ऐसी कोई बिल्डिंग वहां पे एग्जिस्ट करती थी. और इससे फर्क क्या पड़ता है? इससे फर्क ये पड़ता है कि ऐसे एक सिचुएशन होगी जहां पे ये इसकी जो मेयर एग्जिस्टेंस है वो भी कभी वजूद में नहीं होगी, किसी को नहीं पता होगा ये कभी एग्जिस्ट करती है, ना किसी ने डॉक्यूमेंट किया होगा. تو دس از جسٹ ٹو ہائی لائٹ دا پوائنٹ کہ ہیریٹیج پرزرویشن کیوں اتنی امپورٹنٹ ہے، کہ بہت ساری ایسی چیزیں ہیں، بہت ساری ایسی بلڈنگز ہیں، بہت ساری ایسی جگہ ہیں جو کہ اگر ہم ڈاکومنٹ نہیں کریں گے یا اگر پبلک کی اویئرنیس ان تک نہیں آئے گی تو وہ بیسکلی ایسے ہو جائیں گے کہ جیسے کہ وہ ایگزسٹ نہیں کرتی تھی. اور انسان جو ہے، جو چیز آپ ایسے سمجھ لیں کہ اس کی کانشیسنیس سے نکل جاتی ہے، ایونچولی وہ لارجر نیریٹو سے بھی نکل جاتی ہے. تو یہاں پہ ایک امپورٹنٹ کوشچن آتا ہے کہ کیوں ہمیں ہیریٹیج کو کنزرو کرنا چاہیے. یہ ایک بڑا امپورٹنٹ کوشچن ہے کہ کیوں کنزرو کرنا چاہیے، مطلب اس کی کیا ضرورت ہے. پہلی چیز یہ کہ کیا بس یہ ایک ایستھیٹک پرسیوٹ ہے جو کہ آرٹسٹ اور آرکیٹیکٹس اور یہ کرنے لگے ہوئے ہیں. لیکن یہ ایک ایسی چیز ہے جو کہ میں کہنا چاہوں گا کہ اٹس مور دین ایستھیٹکس. پوائنٹ یہ ہے کہ جو ہیریٹیج بلڈنگز ہوتی ہیں، دے پارٹ آف یور ہسٹری، دے ایکٹ ایز نوڈز آف یور ہسٹری. آپ کو پتا ہے ایک جگہ پہ ایک بلڈنگ تھی، وہ ہسٹری کے اندر ایک جگہ پہ اس کا ایک اہم کردار ہے اور پوری ہسٹری کے اندر وہ کنیکٹڈ ہے. ٹھیک ہے، تو جب وہ بلڈنگ ایگزسٹ کر رہی ہوتی ہے تو وہ ہسٹری بھی الائیو ہوتی ہے، وہ آپ کے کلچر کا حصہ ہے، وہ آپ کی ہسٹری کا حصہ ہے، وہ آپ کی سوسائٹی کے نیریٹیوز کا حصہ ہے. لیکن جب وہ بلڈنگ چلی جاتی ہے یا وہ جو بھی اس کا ایویڈنس ہے وہ ختم ہو جاتا ہے، تو پھر وہ جو اس کا ایک سوشل امپیکٹ ہوتا ہے، جو اس کا ایک سوشل انفلوئنس ہوتا ہے، وہ بھی ختم ہونا شروع ہو جاتا ہے. تو یہ چیز ہمیں سمجھنے کی ضرورت ہے کہ دس از ناٹ اے میئر ایستھیٹک پرسیوٹ، دس از اے سوشو پولیٹیکل ایکشن، دس از اے پولیٹیکل ایکشن. جب آپ کوئی بلڈنگ کو کنزرو کرتے ہیں تو آپ ایکچولی اس سے ریلیٹڈ ہسٹری، اس سے ریلیٹڈ کلچرز، اس سے ریلیٹڈ لوگ، ان کی بھی میموری کو پرزرو کر رہے ہیں اور ان کے کلچر کو پرزرو کر رہے ہیں. تو یہ بہت ایک امپورٹنٹ چیز ہے جو کہ ہمیں سمجھنے کی ضرورت ہے کہ اس سے بڑھ کے ہمیں اس چیز کو کنسیو کرنا چاہیے کہ جو ایک لارجر پبلک پہ، سوسائٹی پہ اس کا ایک امپیکٹ ہے، اس کو بھی کنسپچولائز کرنا چاہیے جب ہم کنزرو کریں. تو یہ اس طرح سے بہت امپورٹنٹ ہے. دوسری چیز یہ بہت امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ جو کوئی بلڈنگ ہوتی ہے، کوئی آرکیٹیکچر کا کوئی بھی آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ ایویڈنس ہوتی ہے، فزیکل انفراسٹرکچر ہے، دیٹ از پارٹ آف یور سوشل انفراسٹرکچر ایز ویل، آپ کے کلچر کا بھی حصہ ہوتا ہے. اس فزیکلٹی کو جب آپ پروٹیکٹ کرتے ہیں تو اس سے ریلیٹڈ کلچر، اس سے ریلیٹڈ ڈسکورس پہ آپ پروٹیکٹ کرتے ہیں. موسٹ امپورٹنٹلی اٹ پروٹیکٹس یور آئیڈینٹی ایز ویل. اب اس میں سب سے امپورٹنٹ چیز یہ ہے جو کہ میرا ایک پرسپیکٹو ہے کہ کیا ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ہماری سوسائٹی ایسی ہو جس میں کسی قسم کی کوئی ڈائیورسٹی نہ ہو، کسی قسم کی کوئی بھی اس کے اندر جو ہے ڈفرینس کی گنجائش نہ ہو. اور یہ چیز ایک سچویشن ہم آج کل فیس بھی کریں. جیسے کہ ایک ابھی جو اسپیکر تھے انہوں نے بتایا تھا کہ جب وہ گردوارہ جو ہے پرزرو کری تھی تو وہاں پہ ان کو ایک اس چیز کا بہت سامنا کرنا پڑا تھا کہ لوگوں نے پوچھا کہ آپ گردوارہ کیوں کنزرو کر رہے ہیں. تو ایک بڑا امپورٹنٹ کوشچن ہے کہ ہم بیسکلی ایز اے سوسائٹی کہاں پہ جانا چاہتے ہیں. اور یہ چیز اس چیز میں بہت زیادہ ریفلیکٹ ہوتی ہے کہ ہم کس قسم کا آرکیٹیکچر بھی پرزرو کرتے ہیں. آپ کو پتا ہے کہ اس میں کوئی دوسری ڈبیٹ نہیں ہے کہ جو ریلیجیس اسپیسیز ہیں، خاص طور پہ مسلمانوں کی، اس کے لیے آپ کو کوئی بہت ایڈوکیٹ کرنے کی ضرورت نہیں ہے پرزرو کرنے کے لیے. آلریڈی کمیونٹیز جو ہیں وہ اس کو پرزرو کر رہی ہوں گی، اس کے لیے ساری ایفرٹ بھی کر رہی ہوں گی. لیکن جو زیادہ تر انڈیجرڈ سائٹس ہیں وہ موسٹلی وہی ہیں جو کہ دوسری کمیونٹیز کو جو ہیں ریپرزینٹ کر رہی ہوتی ہیں. تو یہ بڑا امپورٹنٹ ہے ہماری سوسائٹی کی ایز اے ملٹی کلچرل سوسائٹی ایوولوشن کے لیے بھی، اور ویسے بھی ایک اوور آل ڈائیورسٹی کو پروٹیکٹ کرنے کے لیے. اب یہاں پہ ایک بڑا امپورٹنٹ کوشچن آتا ہے کہ ہم کس طرح سے، کون سے اسٹیک ہولڈرز ہیں وہ کیا ایک امپورٹنٹ رول پلے کر سکتے ہیں. میں تھوڑا اس میں وہ ایک بڑا کمپلیکس قسم کی چیز ہے. لوگ اسے ایز اے ٹورسٹ سائٹ دیکھتے ہیں یا اس کو ایز اے ریلیجیس سمبل دیکھتے ہیں. وہ ایک اس کی کمپلیکس، اس پہ بہت بات ہو سکتی ہے کہ پبلک کی پرسیپشن کیسی ہوتی ہے ہیریٹیج کی. لیکن اس میں سب سے امپورٹنٹ چیز ہے جو کہ میں پوائنٹ آج دینا چاہ رہا ہوں، وہ یہ ہے کہ پبلک کی جو اویئرنیس ہے وہ ڈائریکٹلی پروپورشنل ہے کہ آپ کی جو کنزرویشن کس لیول کی جا کے ہوتی ہے. اس لیے یہ بہت ہی امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ پبلک کی اویئرنیس کو ریز کیا جائے. ڈفرینٹ قسم کے جو اس قسم کے انیشیٹوز لیتے ہیں وہ دے ول گو اے لانگ وے. یہی ایک سوچ تھی جو کہ جس نے مجھے موٹیویٹ کیا کہ آئی شوڈ اسٹارٹ میکنگ ویڈیوز جو کہ ڈفرینٹ قسم کی جو سائٹس ہیں جو کہ لیسر نون ہیں یا کہ وہ تھوڑی سی آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ اتنا لوگوں کو پتہ نہیں ہے مین اسٹریم نیریٹیوز میں، ان کے اوپر ویڈیوز بنائی جائیں تاکہ زیادہ سے زیادہ لوگوں کو پتہ چلے اور ان کی اویئرنیس جو ہے وہ اس بارے میں امپروو ہو. اچھا، یہاں پہ میں ایک کوئکلی بات کرنا چاہوں گا ایک اور چیز کی کہ ہمیں کچھ گائیڈ لائنس، ایک سرٹن قسم کا ایک پیراڈائم بھی ہمارے ذہن میں ہونا چاہیے کہ جب ہم کنزرویشن کی بات کریں، کیونکہ یہ ایک سنگل ڈائمینشنل پروسیس نہیں ہے جس کو جنرلی لوگ جس طرح سے دیکھتے ہیں. اس میں بڑا امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ ایک ملٹی فیسیٹیڈ قسم کی ہماری اپروچ ہو جب ہم کوئی کنزرویشن کی بات کریں. سب سے امپورٹنٹ چیز ٹھیک ہے وہ ہمیں سمجھ آتی ہے کہ اس بلڈنگ کا انفراسٹرکچر اس کی فزیکلٹی کو پرزرو کرنا ہے, لیکن اس پروسیس کے دوران جو باقی چیزیں اس کے اراؤنڈ ہو رہی ہیں وہ بھی بہت امپورٹنٹ ہیں. فار ایگزامپل اڈیپٹیو ری یوز کے کانسیپٹ سے آپ لوگ واقف ہیں کہ اگر ایک بلڈنگ کو آپ پرزرو کریں تو یہ بہت امپورٹنٹ ہے کہ وی شوڈ ٹرائی ٹو میک اٹ انٹو این ایکٹیو اسپیس, تاکہ وہ ایک آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ اس کی ایک فنکشنالٹی ہو, لوگ اس کو جو ہے ایکچولی یوز کریں, وہ ایک پیسو ایستھیٹک آبجیکٹ نہ ہو جو آپ بس گزرے اور آپ نے دیکھا کہ یہ کتنی خوبصورت بلڈنگ ہے اور بس. نہیں, اڈیپٹیو ری یوز وہ بہت امپورٹنٹ پرنسپل ہے سسٹینیبلٹی کے اینگل سے. دین یہ بہت امپورٹنٹ پرنسپل ہے کہ اس کے جو اوریجنل آرکیٹیکچر اس کی سینسیبلٹی تھی, مٹیریلس کی ہے, اس کی کسی اور قسم کی, جو اوریجنل میکرز تھے اس چیز کے, ان کی جو انٹینشن تھی اس کو جتنا زیادہ بہتر ہے ریپلیکیٹ کر سکتے ہیں, وہ بھی بہت امپورٹنٹ ہے. پھر یہ ایک بہت امپورٹنٹ چیز ہے جس پہ میں اسٹریس کرنا چاہوں گا کہ اکنامک اس کے جو امپیکٹ ہے اس پہ بھی بات کرنی چاہیے, کیونکہ کسی بھی چیز کی سسٹینیبلٹی کے لیے اس کے اکنامکس کو ہم جو ہے اگنور نہیں کر سکتے. اگر ایک چیز کے ساتھ آپ اکنامک لنکیجز کریٹ کر سکتے ہیں وہ سسٹینیبل ہوتی چلی جائے گی. مطلب دس از ٹرو فار اینی تھنگ. مطلب آپ ٹوریزم دیکھ لیں, جن جگہوں پہ ٹوریزم ہوتی ہے وہاں کے لوگوں کا ایک اپنا اسٹیک اس میں کریٹ ہو جاتا ہے, دین دے ہیو the stake to protect that site. یہاں پہ بات کرنا چاہوں گا شگر فورٹ کی, اور یہ ایک بڑی ہی زبردست قسم کے ایک بینچ مارک پروجیکٹ ہے کہ ہیریٹیج کنزرویشن کس طرح سے ہونی چاہیے. اس کی وجہ کیا ہے؟ اس کی وجہ یہ ہے کہ اس میں اس کی جو فیچرز ہیں اس پہ بات کرنا چاہوں گا کوئکلی, تاکہ آئی کین میک مائی پوائنٹ اکراس. سب سے امپورٹنٹ چیز, پورے پروسیس میں لوکل کرافٹسمین انوالو کیے گئے, ان کے لیے ایک اکنامک انسینٹیو کریٹ کیا گیا. پھر جو لوکل کمیونٹی تھی اس کو اس میں انوالو کیا گیا ڈائریکٹ اس کے ریسٹوریشن کے پروسیس میں. پھر جو اس کا آرکیٹیکچر اس کو کنزرو کیا گیا ہے, اس میں اس کی جو اوریجنل سینسیبلٹی تھی اس کو مد نظر رکھا گیا, بٹ ایٹ دا سیم ٹائم اس کو ایک بہت ہی ماڈرن طریقے سے جو ہے وہ انٹرپریٹ کر کے دوبارہ بنایا گیا ہے. پھر ایک بہت امپورٹنٹ چیز اس کے اندر کہ اس کا اڈیپٹیو ری یوز کیا گیا, پورے کے پورے فورٹ کو جو کہ ایک رائل ریزیڈنس سے کنورٹ کر کے ایک ہوٹل میں, لگژری ہوٹل میں کنورٹ کر دیا گیا. ناؤ اٹس بین رن بائی سینا ہوٹلز, آپ کو پتا بہت پاپولر سائٹ ہے. اور اس کی وجہ سے ہو کیا رہا ہے کہ وہ اب سارے ریونیوز بھی جنریٹ کریے. اب انٹرسٹنگ چیز یہ ہے کہ اس سارے جو ہوٹل کی رننگ ہے اس کے اندر جو لوکل کمیونٹیز ہیں ان کو ہی جو ہے ہائر کیا گیا ہے, وہ کوکس ہیں, وہ دوسرے اس کے اندر جو ہے وہ نوکریاں کر رہے ہیں, جو کہ بڑی زبردست چیز ہے کیونکہ اس فورٹ کا جو فیوچر ہے وہ اس لوکل کمیونٹی کے فیوچر کے ساتھ ٹائڈ اپ ہو گیا ہے. پھر ایک بڑی انٹرسٹنگ چیز اس کے اندر ہے کہ اس جو فورٹ ریونیوز جنریٹ کرتا ہے اس کے اراؤنڈ 20% ریونیوز جو ہیں وہ اس جو پوری شگر جو ایک چھوٹا سا ٹاؤن ہے اس کے اندر ری انویسٹ کر دیے جاتے ہیں. ٹھیک ہے, تو اس سے آپ کو نظر آ رہا ہے کہ یہ ایک بہت ہی زبردست قسم کا ماڈل ہے جہاں پہ آپ آرکیٹیکچرلی تو اسے پرزرو کر رہے ہیں, لیکن جو اس کی اکنامک آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں اس کا امپیکٹ ہے وہ بھی اس کے اندر جو ہے وہ مد نظر رکھا گیا, اور اس کی وجہ سے جو لوکل کمیونٹی ہے اس کا ایک اپنا اسٹیک اس کے ساتھ کریٹ ہو گیا ہے, اور وہ ہیریٹیج سائٹ بھی کنزرو ہو گئی ہے, اور ایونچولی وہ ایک بہت ہی اچھا پازیٹیو امپیکٹ بھی اس کمیونٹی کے اندر جو ہے وہ لا رہی ہے. تو آئی تھنک دس از اے ویری گڈ ماڈل جس کو ہمیں دیکھ کے اس سے کافی کچھ لرن کرنا چاہیے. اس پہ لمبی بات ہو سکتی ہے بٹ آئی تھنک ٹائم تھوڑا کم ہے, تو تھینک یو.
Thank you so much, Said Saab. Aapka bahut shukriya. I would now like to, if you could just stop sharing the screen, that would be great. Thank you so much. I would now like to conclude the seminar in terms of the presentations. It was quite enriching and we learned so much from each of the practice. Some was a reflection, somewhere it was a practice-based, some was one unlearning and relearning, and somewhere it was an experiment, somewhere it was a documentation. So bringing all of these thoughts together, we would now like to conclude on the idea of making of the modern heritage in South Asia, thinking about revitalization and sustainability model. It is going to be interesting to hear once again from the question perspective. We also have a representative from the government, and it's good that those people are also listening to us and reflecting upon that how others are thinking, which is a much needed conversation which needs a lesser gap rather than a larger gap. So is Nazariya ko rakhte hue, Said Saab, thank you so much for sharing the Akhan project. It is one of very close to our hearts project where the city is, where the Sheher is involved with that project and has a very direct ownership. So the ownership idea is also something very critical in the ideology, whereas Zara was talking about anti-grants and anti-system of donor system. We would now like to also think about the creating of that ownership through the idea of civil society and grassroots level thinking of like how to connect. And that connection is something which is also part of our modern systems. So on that note, I would like my colleagues to talk to different speakers, and also speakers, if you each other would want to like kind of direct a conversation with each other, we would like to again hear if you have any questions from each other. So Anmol, would you like to open up with the queries? And if in public, if someone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand like an emoticon, and then we will put you on to ask the question directly from the speakers. Thank you.
I am quickly going over the questions that we have compiled so far, but in the meantime, if anyone from the meeting would like to move forward with their questions, they can.
So my first question would be, yeah, sure. Amna, why don't you go ahead?
People who bring in their archives and family legacies is just to follow the basic protocols, because like I mentioned in my presentation that restoration is a very technical business, restoration and conservation. Why? Because paper archives, unlike monuments, they are very, they get damaged very easily. They are thin and susceptible to damage pretty soon. So we need to follow a basic protocol that is keeping the temperature and the humidity in control, saving them in environment which is the surroundings are acid free, keeping them in a well ventilated room. And of course, like I mentioned myself, is wherever there are like larger library collections or archival collections, at least a plantation of neem trees, because that has proved very effective to control pests and even to control the humidity levels around books and archives. So these are the basic protocols till the time. And of course, we also offer trainings for students of university levels, just like we did recently in Islamabad, because our laboratory is very congested and we operate from a basement of Pir Usamuddin Rashti's library. So we have this small space out of which we restore all these documents. So because of our space constraints, we are talking to organizations for trainings on larger levels. And of course, the trainings of the preservation that we provide through the exhibitions and the display of these archives. So just following the basic protocols, and also which even our government bodies are not following, is handling these archives with gloves. These are just basic museology techniques that you would get from out of.
For you, meantime, so you talked about this human investment, right? In a project like Kitab Ghar. And as well as Ashwarya has put up all the content on her website where it's like, 101 sessions on how to make lime. So there's another kind of human investment. So we all are thinking about this idea of how we can give in through this ethical practice of care managements. Could you expand more on the sustainability methodology of it, like in a long term? How does it work? How does it develop a co-alliance in a long term?
For sure. Yeah, I think that was the missing part in my presentation on how we even run this space. But so I think something that was very important to us was कि अगर हम public service reappropriate करना चाह रहे हैं, तो फिर all the things that make even any sort of structure possible, which is the economy behind it, how can we sort of reappropriate that too? And for the library itself, the idea was that with an investment that sets up 2 months of rent, right? Could this team of people, and I'll come to their human investment in a while also, could this team of people set up income streams that will sustain the place? So it's like आपने चीज़ खड़ी की और फिर उस चीज़ को खड़ी करने के बाद क्या आप उस चीज़ के खड़े होने से income streams generate कर सकते हो, या for example value generate कर सकते हो, because the whole idea behind public service is right कि public service या public education आप आवाम को इसलिए देते हो क्योंकि उससे value generate होती है आपके ही nation और आपके ही country के लिए. So हमारी, because we are a library, the idea was simple for us. We had to generate income streams related to library function. तो उसमें हमने क्या किया, events programming होगी एक income stream generation, दूसरा हमारी इनकम स्ट्रीम जनरेशन होगी फ्रॉम टीचिंग क्लासेस, ऑल्सो समथिंग दैट लाइब्रेरीज डू, और तीसरी इनकम स्ट्रीम हमने सोची थी सेटअप करनी was publishing. So with for our first year, just these पहली दो ही income streams gave us a lot, and the human investment sort of a circle that we were able to create was कि अगर आपने किसी एक इंसान को sort of full trust or ownership दे दी of your mission, each human being sort of has this desire to leave their legacy behind, right? And when you're talking especially about a venue, about relationship to the city, what we were offering to people was a platform to do whatever they wanted to do out of the world. That's something that a lot of people sort of, inherit. A privileged minority inherits, and the majority sort of aspires to achieve कि हम ऐसे मुकाम पर पहुंचे जहां हम अपना कुछ कर सकें. And so to create that sort of a reciprocal relationship with our people is what keeps Kitab Ghar going.
Great, thanks for that answer. Ashwarya, to you, and there's a question as well for you in the chat box.
Okay. So I think the reason why we made the restoration toolbox was also because we felt a lot of times people are in love with their old buildings, they're in love with their heritage, but they don't know who to ask. And there will be a mystery down the road who will say कि तो पुराना हो गया, इसको तोड़ दो, demolish कर दो. So based on our understanding, we realized that a lot of people demolish buildings that are repairable because they don't get access to the right advice. 90% of the time, people don't employ architects because if they are, owning a small house in the old city, etc., architects are expensive for them. They don't, but they have the money to probably, repair something in time. So our whole idea was that can we create something which is a simple resource that can be understood by homeowners as well as regular contractors and civil engineers, so that they can firefight things on their own, because it's very rare that a small project will get a professional involved. So the digital way was one of the easiest solutions for us to do this, and I'll put the link in the chat so that you guys can also explore what we've created. But the making of this was also a sort of a educational exercise. So we did multiple internships that we did over 2 years where we mentored students, and all of these manuals that we have created are co-created with the students. So they are learning, and while they are learning, they are producing. So it was like a cyclical process. So we think that this is the beginning, and it can go on. So it also led us to educational institutions wanting to do, let's say, workshops on these materials and bring it part of the regular academic system, which was not happening before. So, for example, because of this toolbox, we got into in touch with the university, and then they started, we were able to do a workshop with their students on hands-on material, etc. So it's a beginning of a process. Having said that, the sustainability of the platform is always going to be a problem, because there is only so much we can, we have been maintaining it from our own funds for a while. But after this, there has to be an engagement with a bigger stakeholder, whether that stakeholder is a corporate, whether that stakeholder is the state, whether that stakeholder is another government institution. So what we tried to do with the European funding was basically upscale the idea and talk to these people whose doors are usually closed for civil society. So, which is leading me into the next question. We can want a lot of things, but do our voices actually reach the policymakers, or is there a possibility of what we want tabled to the people who are making the policy. And I think that's what we were able to achieve with the European Union project, because we got a chance to actually sit face to face, put out our manifesto, talk to different municipalities. And I won't say that we achieved a lot, but I think it's the beginning of the process. And so the actual challenge we face is not so much with not having a legislation or not having a policy. It is the implementation of the legislation and policies that is overridden by things like corruption, by things like vested interests, by things like builder mafias. So on paper, we will have a heritage policy. On paper, we will have listing. On paper, it will see you can't destroy. But what happens on the ground?
Rubab, I would wanted you to expand a little bit of your methodology. If you could a little bit reflect on my query earlier that I had asked you, knowing that there is a whole interest of Sikh tourism at the moment, how do you see this documentation of yours?
Okay, so whatever I do, the documentation part, it is not for any foundation or somebody, it's for my own sake. So after, I think your question that I wanted to answer was, how did you engage the community and how did you train your labor? I would like to answer that first because that is more relevant to community building. So basically what we did is they were living together for 2 years. We were there on site for 2 years, from day one till we executed the project. There was no place to go around. It was literally on a hilly area, so they didn't have much to do. So what they did is, at night they would sit together, talk it out. We'll go at night and talk to them about it at Langar around 7:30. So it was always a session for about an hour or 1.5 hours. What they do. So initially they started teaching us geometry on site, the ustads. Then we started, it is all started from us. We were 4 people on site, 4 architects, and we started learning how to chisel the brick, how to make the material, how to grind it, what consistency do we need. And with us, the labor started to get into the whole activity thing. So it was an activity for about a year straight on site, which trained a lot of people, gave them the opportunity that we get in the university to explore ourselves, the foundation. Want to study. That is the base of how we did. We then we performed the dance next to the.
Sorry, Rubab, I can't hear your response.
People and start exploring the colors, the fresco working with the Aga Khan.
Okay, so thank you so much. I mean, Rubab, maybe you can write to us in the message box because we can't hear you properly. You can hear me, right? Okay, so
Yes,
on this note, I would like to conclude our first session. I'm sorry we've gone over the time. We usually take 1.5 hours of your precious time. Already everyone is doing it as a on like on a pro bono level. So we don't want to take lots of your precious and important time. I just wanted to conclude on a few things. By listening to all of you. Your presentations are, of course, very important to us, and we have recorded this session. This will go on YouTube, and I hope you're okay with that. This is also a kind of a way of us to share this knowledge with others, especially students, especially academia researchers and new practitioners. For example, Ashwarya, your work, Zara's work, Paras's work, all of this work becomes into a larger narrative, which is to kind of continue this discourse in many aspects. I'm really proud to say that my colleagues and my office, PCCC, HWK, MMA, has come together to put a very interesting program. I'm going to read out these 8 sessions to all of you. These are just like typical outlines that we conclude on, and we hope that you can sign in and come back and listen to others as well. We have speakers from Nepal, Bangladesh, India, who have volunteered to be part of this conversation. Our second session, which is going to take place on the 19th June, will be on moving forward with the past, protecting and rethinking modern heritage. We have really interesting speakers. One is Lahore Nama by Umair Hashmi, George Jose, who's an urban anthropologist at NYU, and then Zahid Qadri, who's also part of the government, and she represents ICOMOS. So it'll be nice to hear all those together and thinking about moving forward. Then our next, after that session, which is on the 21st June, is going to be a really exciting one. It's called Preservation of the Culinary, Culture and Practice as Modern South Asian Heritage. We are very, very excited about that because we have some really interesting grassroots level people thinking about food preservation. And of course, we have a really exciting project in that, which is the Pakistan Museum of Food. SOC Films. We have Suvir Saran from talking about food, again, from an in perspective. We have Anubhav Sapra, Nilofer Afridi Kazi, and Kavita Didi, who has set system. We have her on board. Their fourth will be on reimagining heritage through cultural spaces. Then the next one would be Feminist Politics of Visibility, Reclaiming Public Spaces Through Heritage. That is academia and its role in shaping city landscape, which is an exciting one, and a strong panel for that. Second last is social media's role in safeguarding heritage. Again, carries a lot of responsibility, carries a lot of notion that how social media projects an aspect of what heritage preservation really means. And especially with these short reels that we see, are they extractive? Are they long-term conversation? Are they creating some kind of momentum and awareness? This is all going to get unpacked in that. And our last one is Echoes and Ethos of Modernity in South Asia. All the abstracts, all the information will go up online. So please follow us on all these various platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And we hope to have another really exciting project next year. And please continue with the Alliance. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.